Hey Internet, I am on my way home and figured I would take a minute, jump live. It is dark once again, but what can I tell you? These are the chances we have to chat right now. So I'm going to broadcast it anyway, and hopefully you guys won't mind too much. I may go ahead and enhance it a little bit for going to YouTube, but we'll see. Oh, really? We're going to just be idiots, aren't we? So, what did I want to talk to you about today? Well, I figured I would update you a little bit on the hardware project that I had been talking about a week ago. So I looked around and I couldn't really make the numbers on the manufacturing work. So that project was going back into the bin of projects that I'm doing as part of Production Dojo, but not necessarily something that's going to be a product of its own. And that will allow us to go ahead and just work it out as a technical problem, but not necessarily feel compelled to try and make all the numbers work as a profitable project on its own, which I kind of feel good about. It was, marginally useful as a potential mass consumer item. The margins were always really thin, so it's probably a little better, all things considered, to go this way. I will, when I do that project, sort of put in the comments for it the commercial project that fills that niche, that I think it sort of makes my project a little obsolete. I don't feel too bad, though. The commercial project in question needed about $425,000 worth of investment to be viable. So I wasn't really going to pull together that kind of money for hardware manufacturing. I've moved down the list. I'm working on a software project as my my next entrepreneurial venture. So we'll see how that goes. It's iPhone, Android, Windows desktop application, probably Xamarin and UWP, but potentially React Native for those of you playing technological bingo at home. So who knows? That could be interesting. We could go that way. The rest of the weekend, I've got 2 different client projects I've got to deliver before Monday, and then I might take a couple of days next week and sort of work on some stuff on my own. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, let's talk books for a moment. We probably have about 5 more minutes before I get where I'm going. And let's jump on the next book in our Books That Influenced Our Lives series and make short work of Starship Troopers. So I read Starship Troopers when I was very young. I read a lot of very classic, old school sci-fi at the time. And Starship Troopers was definitely sort of the birth of the power armor genre. It probably runs neck and neck with a series of books by something about an organization called Hammer Slammers, which was a sort of mercenary tank force. And that had a lot to do with sort of the beginnings of my military sensibility. But Starship Troopers, the book, as opposed to the movie, was really had a lot to do with service and democracy, and most importantly, the costs of democracy and freedom. So they talk about this in the movie Starship Troopers, but in the movie they sort of use it as a punchline. It's like, oh, look at these hyper-patriotic, jingoistic sort of assholes. But in the book, and for many of us who liked it in the book, there's nothing wrong with this philosophy. It's that society is not oppressive. It's not that sort of semi-totalitarian fascistic state that is portrayed in the movie. Of course, your average Hollywood liberal has no concept of what that book is talking about. Of course, they have no understanding of this. Patriotism and service and duty for these people has always been sort of a bad punchline that's only used by idiots. But the core thesis of Starship Troopers, the book, politically, the thing that struck me, the boot camp stuff is good. The interpersonal military interplay is good. How the officers owe certain levels of performance. You'll notice the thought here, that sort of obligation of power that goes from, yeah, Eric, right? See, it's a good movie. that obligation of power that flows from the officer corps to those who follow them and backwards. That ties in with what I was saying about Lord of the Rings and kingship. And it's going to be a recurring theme. But more than that, that also flowed from the state to the individual. So one of the core points in Starship Troopers is that the only people who had the full democratic franchise to vote in that society were people who had performed military service. Now, the side effect to that would then be anyone who wanted to be in military service had to be accepted. And that meant if you were a quadriplegic and couldn't do anything physical, but you wanted to be a citizen, they had to find a job for you, and it might be nothing. They might, prop you up somewhere watching a radar screen, or they may use you as an experiment in different medical treatments. They may, whatever. If you wanted to do it, they had to find a job for you. That was how they preserved the idea that anyone who wanted to have the vote could. Anyone who wanted a franchise could. But in order to vote, in order to have a say in society, and in a democratic society, the vote is essentially the ultimate exercise of power. If you wanted to have the power to shape the future of the society, you had to be willing to defend that society, if necessary, with your life. And that was what military service represented to Heinlein at this moment in his life. So, you wanted to vote, you wanted to be able to decide what a society did with their money, you wanted to be able to shape the laws, you wanted to be able to, in essence, shape how that society used force, which is the ultimate backing of all government regulation, then you had to be willing to die, if necessary, protecting that society. And if you were not willing to do so, then in the book, in that society, you were protected by the law. You had it's not like you were a slave, but you couldn't vote. So you could benefit from the society, but you had no right to shape that society if you were not willing to serve and fight and die for and with the society that you wanted control over. Now, I know that thought doesn't have an enormous amount of popularity. Frankly, at a time when it's clear that a significant percentage of the U.S. population would be perfectly happy allowing non-citizens, people who have no obligation to the society they live in, to vote and shape its future, that the idea that you would have to be willing to perform military service to qualify the vote would be basically anathema to the electorate as it stands. But for me and for a fair number of people who read that novel, it makes perfect sense to me. And that reality that if you are going to participate in and exercise control over society, you have to be willing to defend it. You have to be willing to serve it, was a key point in my emotional development and my mental development at an early age. And it was one of the critical factors that led me to join the military when I turned 17, when I could do it. As soon as I could, I realized that I wanted to do that. And this is, 1983 when I signed up. The Cold War is raging in full force. There is an actual evil empire out there in the world when I was at that age that was bent upon our destruction. War was likely to the point of really feeling it was inevitable, and we were outnumbered and we were outgunned, and the future of democracy was actually really possibly at stake. And it was in that environment and shaped by the thoughts, in part by Starship Troopers, not because the book said it, but because the book introduced me to a set of ideas that made sense to me. And then I went and read, other people. I read Adam Smith. I read the letters of the Founding Fathers. I read some of what Ben Franklin had to say. I read, some of this stuff that nowadays people would probably consider almost heretical. And it just made perfect sense to me. So when I could, I signed up and I went and I served. And as a result, I don't feel at all bad about feeling like I have something to say about the direction of the society I live in. In a way I would not feel like I had the right to do if I didn't serve. Now, that's not to say that I think everyone who hasn't served doesn't necessarily have the right to talk about the society. That's not the society we live in. And a lot of the people I know who didn't serve, if that was the way that they could exercise the vote, they would have served. I'm not I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm simply trying to explain why this book had such a profound effect on my life, and that the effect was real. It shaped how I spent 6 years of my life. And in a very real way, still continues to shape how I see public service, the vote, the right to vote, and the exercise of both government power on the individual and the individual's response to that power as a whole. So that's Starship Troopers. If you've only seen the movie, read the book. It's a short book. If you like military stuff, you will love the book. If you like humor, you will like the book. If you like great dialogue, you will like the book. If you find a certain set of ideas interesting, you may find the book philosophically compatible with your thoughts. Otherwise, you'll just think it's a pretty good read. The movie is enjoyable for what it is, and I can certainly watch Denise Richards in anything, do just about anything. So that was fun. And there were moments in the movie that were touching, but it's not the book. And that's not a bad thing, but I think you might enjoy the book. Anyway, thanks for watching. To those of you that did, those of you who stayed to the end, I really appreciate it. And we will talk about another book another time. Feel free to leave your comments in the bottom here. If you've seen the movie and liked it or didn't like it, if you've watched read the book, liked it or didn't like it, I'd be interested in your thoughts. If you just think Denise Richards is hot, go ahead and, say that too. Kendrick, thanks for joining, dude. We're pretty much wrapped up, but I appreciate you sticking in, and maybe you will watch the video after this and see what you think. All right, guys, have a great afternoon or evening, I guess, because it's dark outside. Bye.